Hello, this is Claudia Filos with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and today I'm here with some community members and with a special guest. Maria G. Xanthou is here. She's from the University of Thessaloniki. Thank you so much for joining us today, Maria.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and thank all of you for participating.
Yeah. So, Maria, I know we're going to have lots of opportunities to talk with you in the days and weeks to come, and I'll share news about that at the end of our broadcast. But I just want to let people know that you're here today to talk to us about mothers of heroes and monsters, Althaea and Callirhoe. And so you're going to be talking about these maternal figures in epic and lyric, and walk us through some very specific focus passages. But before we get to that, I just would like to share a little bit about your bio, if you don't mind.
Yes.
That you've taught classical languages, literature, and thought, and ICT, that is Internet and Communication and Technology.
Yes.
In teaching classical languages at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki since 2001. You are the adjunct lecturer at the Open University of Cyprus since 2012, and a research collaborator of the Center for Greek Language. Your research interests include Greek lyric poetry, both monodic and choral, Aristophanic and Attic comedy, Attic rhetoric, history of classical scholarship, textual criticism, literary theory, rhetoric, rhetoric, ancient theory of rhetoric, e-learning, and so much more. Right now, you're currently a fellow at the Center for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C., where you've been conducting research. So I hope you can maybe at some point share a little bit about that with us. But right now, I'd like to turn to our topic and invite you maybe to begin our discussion just by introducing us to your topic.
Yes. Well, let's say that my topic has to do with Mother's Day, which is close at hand, and also I will pick up the same topic that Professor, the previous speaker.
Yes.
About monsters and
Yannis Petropoulos,
Yannis Petropoulos, exactly. So I'm going to pick up this theme of monsters and heroes, and I'm going to focus especially on two particular maternal figures, Althaea and Callirhoe. So my argument is that female figures in Steisichorus, especially mothers, exhibit a wide spectrum of emotionality, ranging from subtlety and restraint to what can be defined as pity or sadness, at times pathos. In my presentation, I shall focus on two female figures, Althaea and Callirhoe. Althaea is a mother of a mythical figure, Meleagros, who eventually meets violent death, and the second is the mother of a mythical monstrous figure, Geryon. Now, Althaea is the least privileged of Steisichorian maternal figures. These are figures found in the poetry of Steisichorus, since our knowledge of her depends upon the mutilated Papyrus Oxyrhynchus. This is number 5 and 6 in your handout. Thus, as a poetic representation, she cannot be regarded as wholly and satisfactorily retrievable. The only firm evidence of a female figure is in number 5 of your handout, where a woman of noble descent, Eupatereia, is solemnly addressed with an epithet reserved in Homeric epic for Helen or Tyro, and probably receives the news of her brother's death. This is also in number 5 of your handout.
Can I just say, Maria, just so in case people are listening, so these handouts are available on the website,
yes,
on the Hour 25 website. If you go look there, you'll see this event right there. If you're watching later on, you can find these documents there as well with our focus passages. Thank you so much. Sorry.
And also with select bibliography in case for further reading.
Thank you.
So Haslam has cautiously identified this particular maternal figure with Althaea. Number 5 of your handout provides us with a common epic narrative pattern of someone receiving news from a messenger. This pattern is articulated in, firstly, an address to the recipient, secondly, a warning to the female figure about the gruesome content of the message, and thirdly and finally, the content itself delivered in asyndeton. The messenger's address to the anonymous woman, probably Althaea, anticipates that she will be soon actively involved in the story. However, the reference to her in the Iliad, this is passage number 1 of your handout, comes in the wider context of the narrative of Meleager's wrath, ignited by his mother's curses for his killing of her brothers. In the Hesiodic catalogue of women, this is catalogue number 2 of your handout, the reference to Althaea is even more passing, while if taken in conjecture with handout number 4 and handout number 3, does not allow us to conclude that the Hesiodic Althaea had a part in her son's death. The fragment that could involve this female figure is handout number 6 in your handout. Here, the supplement of the proper name Althaea in line 3 is a possible but not certain conjecture. However, the epithet Aiocheaira, though attached to another female figure, offers a useful clue. In the Hesiodic catalogue of women, we should note that Artemis' presence is predominant in the genealogy of the Aeolide. This is the line of the Althea's line. So, especially in that of the daughters, where she is called Aiocheaira more than once. This is actually 4 times. Another important element is the Hesiodic Althea's non-involvement in her son's death. According to handout number 2, Meleager's death was caused by Apollo. In Hesiodic catalogue of women, the fragments, handout number 2 and 3, dealing with Meleager and the story of the Calydonian War, are sparse. Even so, Jenny March reconstructed the traditional and pre-Homeric story of Meleager, and which focuses exclusively on the war stirred up over the trophies of the hunt, the boar's head and hide, between the Aetolians and the Curetes. This is actually in Iliad book 9. These fragments indicate Althea's absence even in the aftermath of the hunting expedition. They also attest to Althea's non-involvement in her son's death as an established part of the story. If we combine this evidence, as meager as it may be, combined with a metrical incongruence between the 2 papyri, then Steisichorus would have adopted the traditional pre-Homeric story. So the new element that Steisichorus possibly introduced is detaching the story of the hunting expedition from the story of Althea's reaction to Meleager's death, which he imagines in the aftermath of the hunt. Hesiodic tradition ascribes Meleager's death not to Althea but to Apollo. Yet in Homeric epos and in tragedy, Althea's rise to prominence is inextricably linked with the aftermath of the hunting expedition. Her complicity in her son's death features in the aftermath of the hunting expedition. If communal punishment for Aeneas' failure to sacrifice to Artemis informs the wider backdrop, Althea appears in the Meleager myth either through the curse in archaic epos, this is handout number 1, or the log motif in tragedy, this is Phrynichus' Plevronia. This means in a fight over the boar's hide aroused by internal strife among the boar hunters and Meleagros' subsequent murder of his mother's brother. This is the concluding part of Althea's reaction to her brother's death, resulting either in her cursing her own son and calling on Hades and Persephone to vindicate her brothers, or in her throwing into the fire the log linked with her son's life. Thus, apart from the way Meleager meets his death, another key issue is Althea's reaction to the news of her brother's killing. In the case of Steisichorus' Althea, as a corollary of Croiset's hypothesis that Steisichorus was the first or only early author to use the log motif and Althea's featuring in the aftermath of the boar hunters, we are prompted to think of her involvement disjunctively through either the curse or the log motif, having previously assumed that the 2 motifs were developed in chronological sequence. This is also due to the scarcity of the literary sources that make Meleager's death as a result of his mother's curse, pointing to the Iliadic narrative as their mythical model, whereas the log motif figures in most of later literary accounts of the myth, especially during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. It is speculative to follow Croiset's assumptions, since it contributes to a misunderstanding resulting into this supposed exclusiveness being perceived as originality. One of the key factors here is the connection between Homer and Steisichorus, already mentioned by Simonides and ancient critics. However, the nature and the quality of Steisichorean originality and innovation remains a vexed issue. Nonetheless, the term innovation in Steisichorean poetics can be applied to a wide variety of changes and alterations to the epic tradition. His representation of mythical figures ranges from subtle adoption of epic convention to distinctive radical intimacy. Given what we know of Steisichorus' narrative technique and the construction of his characters, he would be expected to use a more subtle narrative method, probably combining the curse with the log in a traditional way that does not make a sharp break with the epic and folklore tradition. The coexistence of the curse and the log motif in handout numbers 5 to 7 cannot then be regarded as wholly irreconcilable, though it does point to maximalism insofar as both motifs are simultaneously in his narrative. Though ancient scholarship credited Steisichorus with mythical innovation, this innovation had more to do with the quality and focus of his representation rather than with his introducing elements that changed the story altogether. However, I am reluctant to credit Steisichorus with an innovation that would cut him off from the epic tradition. Moreover, since Steisichorus was well versed in this tradition, he would also be well acquainted with the Phakten canon of early Greek epic. This means its standard list of events. In other words, exaggeration, substitution, or suppression is allowed, but not a significant deviation from a story that had been to a certain degree fixed. In this regard, Steisichorus adheres to the Phakten canon by including the mother and son connection, thus implicating Althaea in Meleager's death, brought about by the use of both the curse and the log motif. Maternity as ontological feature is further implied by the possible etymology of Althaea from the verb althaino or the relative aldaino and its possible association with the plant Althaea used as a palliative medicine through the heat it induces. All these lexical manifestations suggest the nomen omen of Althea's name and its association with heat, growth, feeding and healing. This may be speculation, but Steisichorus may have composed a decision monologue for Althaea of sufficient length to accommodate her initial indignant response to her son's action, indignation which would become the fury driving her to throw the log into the fire. Earlier, Steisichorus may have presented her as hovering between maternal feeling and affection towards her brother, and finally as uttering a form of curse, culminating with her grabbing the log and throwing it into the fire. We have few precedents for Althea's speech. Two of the best are the Little Mother's Rhesis and Callirhoe speech or speeches. This is number 8 of your handout. The decision monologue solution then takes into account Steisichorus's what we call Auseinandersetzung with both Homer and Hesiod. Since we have so few early literary sources for Meleager's death, I think that in the case of the Steisichorean Althaea, the curse may well be coupled with the log motif if we take into account 3 more elements. Firstly, The aforementioned etymology of Althea's name may be associated with magic through heat, growth, and healing connotations. Secondly, Althea is invoked as a deity together with Kori, Hecate, and Selene on a cursed tablet from Megara. And thirdly and finally, Versnell's common characteristics among cursing prayers provides a possible outline of Althea's lost speech. Haslam also relates the laconic surviving papyrus text, this is handout number 7, to Meleager's tale. The letters here may stand at the beginning of words, each initiating a new line. The sequence form probably evokes Althea's situation. This means her difficulty in killing her own son, and it may also form part of her reaction towards the news of the text of handout number 5. Moreover, the few surviving letters imply that the wording of the line sequence is as gruesome as the news received and adumbrates a powerful insight into Althea's mentality. Now I will move on to our second maternal figure, which is Callirhoe, Gerion's mother, which actually is molded into the Mater Dolorosa type. Callirhoe is another maternal figure struggling to emerge from the mutilated papyrus, which is in this case Papyrus Oxyrhynchus 2617, which preserves Steisichorus' Geriones. She probably features in an earlier fragment and almost certainly in handout number 8, while her presence is inconclusively dispersed throughout the text. In general, fragment 16, I have not included it in your handout, yields extremely sparse evidence as regards Callirhoe. The poorly attested traces of a female figure's present consist of a participle, aidoisa, supplemented by parrot, and the verb peitheo, coupled with the vocative of noun tekno. I refrain from discussing verse 3, aidoisa, as there is much controversy about the reconstructed text and its attribution to a specific person. However, the combination of the imperative and the evocation teknon provides the first clue for identifying the personal loquens address as a parental figure's discourse to his or her son Gerion. Whatever the parent's identity may be, we cannot deny the intimacy of the discourse. This intimacy helps us contextualize fragment 16 and relate it closely to our focus passage, fragment 17, handout number 8. Now, the passage in handout number 8 is identified with Callirhoe's riches and takes place at a preliminary stage in the narrative of the combat between Heracles and Gerion. Callirhoe calls herself miserable and wretched as regards the child she bore. The convincing supplement alastotokos satisfies both context and meter, but it is a hapax legomenon. If combined with alasta pathoisa, creates a peculiar type of anaphora which involves either a gradatio or an illustration of Melea through kai alastotokos, kai alasta pathoisa, with kai being considered corresponsive, a common use in post-Homeric Greek. Alastotokos refers to Callirhoe as giving birth to a miserable, ill-fated son, while alasta refers most probably to her horrible pain. This means her watching the combat between Heracles and her son Gerion, and thus foreshadows its fatal outcome. So Heresis is delivered at a crucial point of the story. Callirhoe's presence is safely documented by the participle pathoisa in verse 3, and the first person singular verb gonazomai goes with the accusative of the proper name Gariona. This construction is more pregnant than a plain vocative, signaling a culmination of pathos. The firm attestation of Callirhoe's presence is provided by the conditional in verse 5. Drawing a parallel with handout number 12 seems almost inevitable, though Callirhoe's case differs from Hecuba's. Callirhoe's application does not suggest that her plea is accompanied with a gesture similar to that described in Iliad 20:82-84, since Hecuba's gesture is anticipated and staged with ostentatious precision. She loosens the folds of her robe with the one hand and holds her breast with the other. By contrast, Steisichorus seems to focus on the doom that encompasses his heroine's maternity due to the fate of her offspring and her own experience of his death. The possessive adjective hemon, this is handout number 8 again, if combined with the first-person singular verb epeschon or epeschethon, supplemented by Barrett and Page respectively, is both dictic and reflexive. Reflexivity is a subcategory of emphatic use and therefore a secondary and derived property. In that sense, emon, my own, emphasizes the supplemented first-person singular. This verbal emphasis points to a more subtle yet poignant and solemn reminiscence of Callirhoe's breastfeeding little Geryon than Hecuba's literal and theatrical exposure of her breasts. It seems that until verse 5, Callirhoe refrains from physicalizing this poignancy. However, this physicalization possibly takes place in verse 10, Thea peplon, where the thinly attested yet securely supplemented noun peplon, along with its attributive adjective either theodea or evodea, point to Callirhoe having rounded off her speech and unfastened her robe to expose her breast. As I mentioned earlier, this evidence from the scraps is too thin to offer us more than a conjecture concerning Callirhoe's physical movement or the function of peplos in this scene. In addition, the noun peplos is not found elsewhere coupled with an attributive adjective ending in thea. Hecuba's physicality in the Iliad, accompanied by the traditional verbal feature of entreaties, is her way of reminding Hector of how she had nurtured him in the past. This is handout number 12. At another level, what is at stake is the mother's nourishing suckling of a child, as opposed to the imminent sacking of Troy, Hector's paternal and communal space, where he was nurtured as a matter of life and death, memory and destruction. So, Hecuba's application is made in the context of imminent and lethal combat. Therefore, it appears as direct and desperate, with a showy flourish. Moreover, Steisichorus' version of the Geryon myth differs from handout number 9, Apollodorus' later synopsis. The difference of genre, the one being a dramatization of the myth, the latter merely a synopsis, affects the representation of Hecuba and Callirhoe as mothers. In other words, Hecuba's primal entreaty is appropriate to heroic epic, whereas Callirhoe's more pregnant appeal appears to be indirect and is possibly dramatized by a chorus. In the latter case, a mere gesture pointing to the mother's breast would be enough. We thus see that Steisichorus molds Callirhoe's figure by combining two notable Iliadic female figures of the Mater Dolorosa type, Thetis and Hecuba. In fragment 17 resonates with the highlight passages, this is handout number 10, spoken by Thetis and Hecuba respectively. Both the Homeric Dysarastotokea and the Steisichorian Allostotokos are hapax and bring together the ideas of doom and procreation. However, Thetis and Callirhoe are different in an obvious respect, since Thetis is the mother of a mighty hero, Achilles, and Callirhoe is the mother of a monstrous Kuriosum. Dysarastotokea is also associated with Aristeia and indicates the wretched condition of Thetis as the mother of a hero destined to pursue his own destiny with glory and death. In Callirhoe's case, things are rather different. Being a mother of a monstrous Kuriosum, she does not exalt her son in the way Thetis does, as in handout number 10. Despite Geryon's sympathetic portrayal by Steisichorus, it has recently been argued that his monstrosity and alleged foreign identity marginalizes him. Geryon is certainly not human in physical terms, or let's say is supernatural, even though both he and Hector are heroes defending their homeland against an invading enemy. However, I cannot share other scholars' views that Callirhoe is an exact parallel to Hecuba and Thetis. These maternal figures remain reference points for the Steisichorian figure, but I believe that Steisichorus' portrait of Callirhoe runs deeper. It is true that his diction seems like a pastiche of the two Iliadic formulae of self-pity, but Callirhoe's genealogy surpasses Hecuba's and equals that of Thetis. As Okeanos' daughter, Callirhoe can hardly be called a marginal figure herself. She is actually related to Thetis, the daughter of Nereus, the son of Pontus and Gaia, and to Doris, the daughter of Okeanos, since Callirhoe and Doris are Okeanids. They also possess a common feature as mothers of two unique sons, Geryon in his monstrosity and Achilles in his prowess, both short-lived and doomed to meet violent premature death. Another commonality is that Callirhoe's appeal to Geryon is prompted by her wish that her son should not enter the fateful combat, just as Thetis is fully aware of Achilles' life coming towards its end. We can then contextualize Callirhoe within an intricate process of hybridization geared towards the humanization of Geryon in three stages. The first involves Geryon's genealogy, which is directly linked with the mortality he inherits from his father Chrysaor, though Geryon's mortality remains a disputed issue on which he himself is pondering, thus adding a philosophical tenor. Although there are few certain instances in Steisichorus' text where Callirhoe and Chrysaor are described as a couple, their names usually feature side by side as the parents of Geryon in his genealogy. The genitive Chrysauros, as a standard genitive of a proper name, defines the appositional noun uios, alluding to Geryon's genealogy and implicitly advancing the notion of inherited mortality. The second stage is Callirhoe's plea, this is handout number 8, where the audience is prompted by his mother's presence to think of her child's tender infancy. The conjunction of Chrysaor's mortality and Callirhoe's maternity recalls the motif of the association of an immortal goddess with a mortal lover, as in the case of Thetis and Peleus. Maternal plea also has deadly implications through the association of maternal care with inevitable death, exemplified in Hecuba's breast as a signal of imminent death and destruction. The third stage is the description of Geryon's death after Heracles' fatal shot with his arrow, as the poet carries Geryon's humanization further. Steisichorus focuses on the leaning of Geryon's one neck by means of the singular accusative auhena, although Geryon is in fact had three heads and presumably three necks. The drooping poppy simile that accompanies the elimination of Geryon's head serves as more than a striking reminiscence of the Iliad. It can be seen as part of the humanization process. No detailed account of Geryon's supernatural stature survives from the poem, though Steisichorus does not shy away from that fact. However, the simile focuses on the leaves of the drooping poppy. This composite image of a single poppy with multiple flowers, stems, and leaves may allude to Geryon's three heads and three bodies, joined as one at the waist, as described in a handout number 9 Apollodorus account. Steisichorus' representation of Callirhoe builds upon his epic models in a more subtle, nuanced, and intricate way. In our focus passage, Steisichorus alludes to the most famous figures of the Mater Dolorosa type in the epic tradition. Mixed parentage, breastfeeding as a sign both of maternal care and of imminent death, and maternity as reminder of mortality, form a dense web of images and notions that evoke the Homeric parallels, thus foreshadowing the inevitability of Geryon's downfall. In sum, Steisichorus' manipulation of Homeric parallels in his humanization of Geryon depicts an intimate image of a mother expressing her maternal care towards her child. In general, Steisichorus' Althaea and Callirhoe stand alongside those of the Iliad in making an important contribution to the maternal figures of later lyric poetry and Attic tragedy. Steisichorus portrays their relationship with their sons in ways that are subtle, intimate, and occasionally direct. The maternal feeling underlying their speeches may range from the controlled and balanced to the intimate, immediate, and caring. It is true that the little remains that we have sometimes allows only to speculate, but the overall narrative gives these mothers a vigilant awareness hovering between maternal feeling towards a son and affection towards a brother. As a result, their wide range of tonality in presenting their maternal identity entails intimate emotionality, genuine concern for their sons' fates, sincere empathy, and determination for action. All of these elements form Steisichorus' blueprint of maternal figures. Thank you very much for your attention and for your time.
Maria, thank you so much. A little silent clapping there. We were all muted, but thank you so much. What a beautiful, beautiful paper. You know, and I think that it is just such a beautiful idea that you know, the exposure of the breast, or the breast is a symbol both of maternal care and of imminent death and destruction. That is so moving, and really gets to the heart of these passages.
First of all, before moving on to our discussion, I would like to wholeheartedly thank my colleagues at the Center for Hellenic Studies, Dr. Sebastiana Nervenia and Dr. Simiali, with whom I have shared my thoughts, and I think that the paper has benefited from their sharp criticism.
Beautiful. And just to be clear, you know, these wonderful guests are among us here, so they're going to join us in the conversation. Yes. So, you know, I think one thing, so what's so great about these CHS open house discussions is that, you know, we're really putting scholars in contact with citizen scholars, in contact with the general public who are just interested. So we have such a wide range of audience here. I want to include everybody, okay, in this discussion. Yes. So I think one way to do that really is to focus on the text, and maybe we could just start reading it together and really get into that. I think the text is really going to lead the way forward in this discussion. So can you select a passage that we might read together? And again, if you're watching our online discussion, you can find the handouts on the Hour 25 website.
I think that one of the most important focus, let's start from, for example, from Iliad 9, our first passage, where, for example, you know, this is Phoenix talking to Achilles.
Okay, so we're just so that everyone can be on the same page here. We're talking about Iliad 9, around lines 538 to 5.
This is the, you know, the highlighted text. You know, I don't know whether, I mean, shall I read it, or there's no need to.
I think reading it together is beautiful, actually. And can we invite a community member maybe to read?
Yes, yes.
I think you're such a beautiful reader, but it's just nice to how about
just pick and name one.
Yeah, Sarah, maybe could you read for us? And Marie, you could just let us know exactly what you would like her to read, the highlighted section?
So, yes, yes, I especially, you know, the last, yes, I think that the last 4 lines of the highlighted passage, and especially if we go in the second page, okay, this is the second highlighted passage of Meleager's account from verse 570.
Great. So maybe we could start at 550. Yes. So we're talking about Iliad 9, 550.
Yes.
Through about 556, and then we're going to jump forward to 570.
Yes.
Okay. So starting at line 550. Now, so long as Meleager, dear to Ares, warred, so long went it ill with the Curetes, nor might they abide without their wall, for they were very many. But when wrath entered into Meleager, wrath that maketh the heart to swell in the breasts also of others, even though they be wise, he then, wrath at heart against his dear mother Althaea, abode beside his wedded wife, the fair Cleopatra, daughter of Marpessa. And jumping to line 570, and he was wroth with his mother's curses, for she prayed instantly to the gods, grieved to her brother's slaying, and furthermore instantly beat with her hands upon the all-nurturing earth, calling upon Hades and dread Persephone, the while she knelt and made the folds of her bosom wet with tears, that they should bring death upon her son. And the Erinyes that walketh in darkness heard her from Erebus, even she of the ungentle heart.
So please, Maria. Yeah.
Again, this is where we see that, you know, Homer is actually, he does not refer how Meleagros dies. He leaves this matter open. He just mentions that, and the Erinyes that walketh in darkness heard her from Erebus, even she of the ungentle heart. So he leaves this subject open. We don't, I mean, he just leaves Erinyes walking in darkness. He doesn't anticipate of the outcome, he just leaves this thing open. So if we go for example, now to our focus passage number 2 of the Hesiodic Catalogue of Women.
Yes.
Okay, if Sarah would be kind enough to read the highlighted passage, like, and no one, you know, from, yeah?
And no one in man destroying tearful was dared to withstand strong Meleager when he looked him in the face. No one of the men, heroes, whenever he strove to do battle face to face. But at the hands of Apollo, he lost his dear spirit fighting the Curetes around high Pleuron.
This is where, you know, Hesiod starts is becoming more specific of how Meleagros, as regards Meleagros' death, whereas Homer leaves this this subject open. Hesiod is more specific. He actually informed us that Meleagros has died at the hands of Apollo.
Right.
So no maternal involvement here. There is no maternal involvement in here. Now the same is true about our focus passage number 3. So we can just leave it aside, and also with our focus passage number 4.
Right.
So let's say that it was Phrynichus who was first introduced. Actually, I mean, it is attested. Let's say the first attested use of the log is by Phrynichus, and then we meet this motif in other authors like Bachylides and so on.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm wondering if there are any questions at this point or comments that people have on these passages and the beautiful ideas that you've brought up for us so far. Anyone so far? Yeah, Bill. It looks like Bill has a comment or a question.
Yeah, I was wondering about the evidence of bases, particularly with the battle between Hercules and Geryon. There's lots of stuff there.
Could you please repeat, I mean, about the battle of Geryon and Heracles? Yes?
Yes, there's many vases that picture that, drawings of that.
Yes. Actually, Robertson has wrote a wonderful article about Steisichorus and the battle of the battle between Geryon and Heracles. And still, I mean, if you go to Limp, you will find many depictions of vases. So there is an influence, let's say, an interaction of Steisichorian. Some scholars say that actually Steisichorian poetry was so popular that actually influenced the depiction of this combat on vases.
Right.
But there is still, I mean, some debate going on in terms that we haven't had a complete edition of Steisichorian fragments up until 2015. So I think that Steisichorian poetry has to be reassessed in terms of its Homeric backdrop. I do believe that Steisichorus really follows the epic narrative offered both by what we usually call Homer and Hesiod. So all his poetry needs to be reassessed against this this backdrop that we have, and it has been well established.
Do we have any other comments or questions about that? Oh, Helen?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I want to thank you, Maria, because we are so used to seeing maternal figures in tragedy, and this is such a different side of maternal feelings that you show us. Thank you so much for sharing this paper with us.
Thank you very much.
It's another perspective, and it's so interesting.
And I must add also that another train of thought is, in general, Steisichorian poetry is populated by female figures in general. So I think there are two interlocking explanations for this. Either Steisichorus has really been interested in genealogies, like Hesiod, or he used the Hesiodic background for building his narrative, or another explanation, which cannot be exclusive of the previously mentioned, is that populations in Sicily, where Steisichorus came from, were really wanted to know about genealogies. Of course, this has to do with the origin of Sicilian population. There has been an interest, a rising interest as regards of what actually Sicilian populations are made of. Are they indigenous? Are they immigrants? And so on. Especially Italian scholars are doing magnificent research on Sicilian population. I think this is another train of research that has to be pursued. But in general, if you look to Dennis Page's Poete Meliki Greki, you will see many Steisichorian poems bearing the names of female figures. And I think that this is no coincidence.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack Vaughn in Houston. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, it's a brilliant paper, very, very stimulating. Do you think there is in Steisichorus's depiction of the fight between the BA Heraclea and Geryon, do you think there is a certain sympathy for Geryon?
Yes, I think that there is a certain. He is trying to present this figure, which, if you read the text, at some point you forget he's a monster, because he gives him textual space, where either as a reader or as an audience, you can really experience Geryon's may I use the word inner world. We catch a glimpse of Geryon's inner world. So I think that this has to do with, I have mentioned this in my paper, that Steisichorus is part of Sicily and in general of this wider Mediterranean world. That so he actually tries to capture the imaginary world of people who live in Sicily, and which I would not define them as Greeks. This is a very unique population, is a mixed population, you know. So he tries to combine the immigrant's identity, the indigenous identity, by exactly giving Geryon with something different, you know, something very curious, you know. He's trying to give him a very humane, well, a very sentimental, humane identity. This is how we experience Geryon through Steisichorian text.
Well, that dovetails with the Helen palinode a little bit too.
Yes, yes.
He's obviously reaching out to satisfy all versions.
Yes, because that's why I spoke a bit about the term innovation. But as I already mentioned, innovation in Steisichorus is a vexed issue because he really hangs on Homeric and Hesiodic tradition. He does not discard Homeric and Hesiodic tradition. But on the other hand, he is trying to make these slight, let's say, alterations that do make a big difference.
Could it be said that Steisichorus brings more emotional content into the myth than is present in Homer and Hesiod? More explicit emotional content.
Well, from my part, I would say yes. But I think that there is still more research work to do in terms that we have, we got our first edition of Steisichorus in 2015. So I think we should also read his passages, both against the Homeric and Hesiodic backdrop and also in terms of performance. We also think we should think about how the poems of Steisichorus were performed, because this is also a very big issue of debate.
So Maria, that's not something our community has discussed before. Can you share maybe just a very brief thought about what you think or what others are saying?
Sorry, could you please?
Can you, since we haven't discussed that topic before, it's such a beautiful, important point. I was hoping could you share a few words with us about what is thought in terms of performance at this point?
You mean, okay. So I think that first of all, this can read well. You can read much more on a forthcoming article by Martin West, like Greek epic lyric or lyric epic. Martin West thinks that the Steisichorian poetry is too long to be performed by a chorus. On the other hand, there are certain people who believed that these performances could have taken place also in terms of reperformances. At least this is how Steisichorus' text came down to us. So I think that the debate is somewhere in the middle. There was a performance, but it had some features of the epic performance as we know it. Because also it has to do with the meter that Steisichorus uses. He uses dactyl epitrits, which is very close, in a way, mutatis mutandis, to dactylic hexameter. Okay, this actually helped the people to perform this text.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. So, I'm also wondering, as we think about performance, and I hope Cleo and Sebastiana and Simi will join us in this discussion too. So please don't hold back. And Sarah too, I know you got to read, but I hope you have a question too at some point. I'm thinking about the performance of lament. And the way that your work here is sort of having me rethink some things about lament, about how, how perfectly what you're saying about the breast and as a symbol of destruction, but also of healing and heat and maternal figures as associated with heat and nurturing and healing. I really think about, sort of lament traditions in terms of the way that a song or let's say a lament can morph between a person, a lover talking about their loved one, describing them in sensual ways, or it could also be in a different context, a song that a mother sings for a baby, right?
Well, actually, I think that the speeches of female figures could fall in the lament in the lament category, or they have some affinities. So I think work could be done in how these texts combine and interrelate with one another. For example, I'm sure that Steisichorus knows how Homeric laments are constructed. That's why he molds them in, let's say, he uses these laments in order to form his own speeches. This is no coincidence. So I think that he is aware of the Homeric lament tradition.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you. Any other comments or questions so far? Sebastian, I see you're unmuted. Do you have a thought you'd like to share?
It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting comments on the performance of Steisichorus poetry, and I just wish we knew more about the Sicilian context and how it differed from mainland Greece or the Athenian specific performance tradition.
Yes.
This is something that could be profitably researched, the difference between the Athenian context and the specific Sicilian context.
I think Sebastiana gave us a very useful and important thought, that so far we have been reading Greek literature under an Athenian lens.
Yes.
which is fully legitimate, because if we think about how there is the Athenian stage of Homeric tradition and the Athenian stage of the reception of Greek lyric poets' text. But exactly, it is, if Sebastiana allows me to build upon her very useful comment, is that Steisichorus actually gives us a very different view of the Mediterranean. I will call it Mediterranean world, not Greek world. We can call it Italiot. We can call it's a different world, different than the Athenian world.
That's so beautiful that we're getting a glimpse of this perspective, right? I mean, that's such an important reminder for us as readers.
Yes.
I see, Simi, do you have a comment or question?
Hi. First of all, hi everyone. It's nice to see you again.
Hi, Simi.
Maria, thank you for your presentation. It's so fascinating.
Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, absolutely. So my question has to do with motherhood and what you seem to be seeing is that motherhood itself is kind of an epic event. And, it's not normally, the idea that a mother and the state of motherhood is somehow epic in itself is something I hadn't I think, fully understood until I read your paper some time back for the first time. And I was wondering what you think about motherhood as the site of origin. It's so primal, the relationship between a mother and a child. And in poetry, that primal relationship gets translated into something else. And it seems that sense of where is the hero from? What is his origin? Or takes us back to the mother symbolically, and we can see the origins symbolically in the figure of the mother. It seemed to me that you started to, in your paper, you started also to see different kinds of mothers as well, so that motherhood wasn't just one. It didn't just come in one form in these different representations.
I think you, in your question, you actually said many things that are very useful, and I will just let me rephrase. I think, as you very eloquently put it, I don't see motherhood as a single-handed trait. Motherhood is constructed, and it takes two to tango. Yes, it's the mother and it's the son. So it has to do with origin, as you said. It has to do with social status. But on the other hand, we cannot deny these figures also an emotionality. I mean, how they negotiate this social status, how they negotiate their origin, how they negotiate even their intimate relationship. For example, we watch, Hecuba, to ask Hector to plead, to address him a plea to go into Troy to save himself. So we actually watch Callirhoe to tell Geryon not to if it's possible, not to engage in combat with Heracles. But still, you can feel that there is a very unique care, which I don't see that we can watch it very closely in other texts. I mean, in tragedy, there is the wrath of the gods, that someone has exceeded a limit, and this is probably, the ultimate goal. But in Steisichorus, what is the goal of the text? Steisichorus wants to present his heroes, to display their inner world. This is what I think. But I would like to hear your also your suggestions, if you have other ideas on this matter.
I'm learning about Steisichorus from you, so I'll get back to you.
So I see we have 2 minutes, so probably time for one more question or comment, if anyone has something. Sarah or Chloe? No?
Well, I was interested in what you were saying earlier when you were talking about Geryon and the references to the maternal figure, helping to present him more sympathetically. I don't know much about Steisichorus, but I was thinking again of applying that same logic to the figures in Homeric tradition, sort of, just, if that's where it originated, perhaps. And there are few heroes where we do have references to the mother figure, but obviously Hector is one of them, as you pointed out, with Hecuba. And he's, as it were, the enemy. He's the Trojan, and yet he's presented very sympathetically. And the other big figure, of course, is Achilles. So, and they're the one too with the most important maternal figures, and they're the ones we perhaps see most sympathetically. So that's given me an interesting perspective, and I'm going to be looking out for who else's mothers are mentioned, and what we know about them to start helping me think through some of the Homeric heroes as well. So that's really useful. And thank you for the introduction to Steisichorus as well, which I knew nothing about.
Another, I must confess that one example that I have not read and I should look into is probably Odysseus' encounter with his own mother in the underworld. That would be really interesting to see how it works.
Thank you.
Yes, you know, what a beautiful thought in terms of a place to continue our discussion. So I just want to invite everybody, remember we can continue our discussion online at the Hour 25 website. We have a discussion forum. We invite everyone to participate. If you have questions about how to do that, you can email us at hero@chs.harvard.edu, and I will get those emails and I will answer them very promptly. I want to thank all our community members here for joining us today.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your time.
Yes, and Maria, thank you so much. We didn't get to talk about it, but I know that you are going to be an ongoing participant in our community in the days and weeks to come. So I just want to let everyone know, please do continue the conversation on Hour 25. And Maria, you can join us there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, Maria, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you and for participating.